Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Prep Your Standard NATO. Today's guest is Wayne McMurtry, also known as the Rogue Adventurer and Run for Resilience. Thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having us here today.
Now, you're not WA based.
Not at the moment, no. Living over in Queensland, so up in Mackay.
So this worked out really well that you just happened to be in town.
Well, I didn't quite just happen to be in town, but yeah, it was really convenient and we could catch up.
Great. Now, you're a veteran, right?
Yes, I am.
How long did you serve for?
So I served 17 years with the Australian Army, both as a reservist and regular soldier.
So a bit of effort going in there then.
Yeah.
So how did you go from being in the military to, what is it, ultra marathons?
Yeah, ultra marathons. Essentially, discovering running was kind of one of the things that I found helped me with my transition from military service to civilian life. Mm-hmm. What I found was that running, people say, how can you run so far? It's like, well, I didn't just start running so far. So I started literally just with 5 and 10k fun runs.
Yep.
I really enjoyed the community that provided. It was also a really good outlet just to, let off some steam by going for a good hard run.
Yep.
But then basically I kind of just discovered that I kind of enjoyed the run. And so then I started running a little bit further, and I did a half marathon and then decided that I wanted to try a marathon. And basically that year, the only marathon that was left was one that was actually an ultra marathon. Mm-hmm. And so I ended up doing a 47k first marathon, because that's how far it was.
My eyes just boggled.
And so, yeah, I kind of went, wow, this is kind of fun. It was a challenge. Mm-hmm. It really was. And every ultra marathon is so uniquely different, even if it's on the same course.
Yep.
The environment's different. The way you feel that day is different. So much goes into it. And the beauty of the whole thing really was that there was such an amazing community spirit. And the easiest way to put it in sort of in a perspective is that for that brief period of time, for that length of time that race may take, everyone is focused on a really specific mission. Everyone's goal is to get through that particular race. The beautiful thing about it is that each person is willing to help the person next to them. It's not a competition against another runner. It's actually just a competition against yourself.
Okay.
But you can't get through it on your own.
Yeah.
And that transcends across a lot of things, and it really goes back to the whole military aspect of you're there with a team, no man's on their own.
So it's a pack run, but you're doing it for fun.
Yeah. And you spend hours and hours on your own.
Now, you've somehow turned this into a business as well?
Yeah, so I've basically just started branching out into trying to make it a standalone business. So last year in September, I ran from Brisbane to Winton, and that was 1,500 kilometres.
Right, okay.
The funny story of that is that I kind of woke up one day and I thought I really need to do something. I thought of this a week later, I started planning it 3 weeks later, I was running it. So that was very impromptu. Mm-hmm. Luckily, I'd been training for 5 years to be able to actually pull it off. So it's certainly not something that most people could wake up one day and just decide to do, although it kind of comes across that way sometimes when we talk about it. And so the idea behind that one essentially was that I wanted to do something that was different and out there and could just tell a story. Mm-hmm. Essentially, it was my own story of finding running and using that to re-engage with the community around me. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, why not just share that story? So I started looking at routes, and then I discovered that in 1914 there was a troop train that took troops to war from Winton to Brisbane. So it picked up guys in Winton, so that was the catchment area for central West Queensland. And then as the train went back through to Brisbane, picked up more people, pulled into Brisbane, the guys got trained for a month, thrown on a ship, and then sailed over to Egypt and then eventually Gallipoli. So I thought, well, that was a really great route, I could just do that. So I was kind of starting Winton. But then I thought, well, hang on a minute. Why don't we make this, because it's a story about coming home, why don't we make this about the actual journey home? And so let's go from Brisbane to Winton. And the really cool thing, as I started thinking about this even more, was that it really is just like when someone gets out of the military. They go from a large area where there's a lot of people around them, they've got a good community base, they will then travel back to wherever they came from. They may even just go through a personal journey where they go into an isolation as such. So you go from a major population centre out to a really small country town where there's next to nothing and you're on your own. And so it was that transition of going from a group environment to being on your own. The run itself, I was on my own for most of it. But the beautiful thing was that we actually stopped in at different RSLs along the way. We stopped in at different community groups. We had, we caught up with different cadet units along the way. It was amazing. And by doing that, it really showed that you could connect with community. It didn't matter where you were. There was always someone who knew your story or who could understand. And that's the main thing that I wanted to show with that one. The beauty of having done it last year was that it was actually also Centenary of Armistice.
Yep.
And that really fit in when I kind of realised this. It really fit in with the whole concept of the journey home. And so obviously we know that we train our troops really well to go to war, but we don't train them so well to come home. And so that was kind of really fitting. It showed that, in World War I, when that ended, a lot of troops had struggles coming home. Every conflict between then and now, a lot of guys and girls struggle coming home. So it's something that we need to work better at as a community to bring people together. There's a lot of great organisations doing a lot of great work, but I think we could do more on the ground, sort of on the coalface, bringing people together, sort of thing, and reconnecting. And so that's kind of what the business is about, and it's very fledgling. So we'll see what happens, but it'll be fun.
That is the first time I've ever heard transition being described in that way, and it fits perfectly. That imagery is, it's just a perfect description of that period of time. Oh, well done. I think you're going to start like posters and marketing material running through my head right now. That picture, I love that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Okay, so you use running to cope with your transition, and then you've turned that into a business, and you've set up Run for Resilience. So how exactly does endurance running help you keep the demons at bay, or help you help other people?
Good question. I'm still trying to figure that out. No, look, endurance running itself, it's such a mental and a physical challenge. Basically, when I started running, it was like, I can't stand being around me, so I'm just going to get out of everyone else's hair. If I can't stand me, then probably no one else can stand me. So how do I get away? The easiest way was just to go for a run. And so literally, short runs turn into longer runs, and then you'd go and spend a few hours. The physical act of moving actually gets things moving in your head as well, and you just process. It's amazing. So you may or may not have heard of flow state or being in the zone before.
Yes, I have.
Okay, so when you're in a flow state, you're kind of not thinking in a straight line. That cuts out all the noise coming out from everywhere, and your brain automatically just takes tangents left and right as to whatever suits where it's kind of going, because you're not consciously thinking of that. So then you come to conclusions, and you can solve things that normally, if you're thinking logically, you can't. And so endurance running was actually a really great way to process things. I didn't realise that at the start, but when I realised that, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. And so it was a form of meditation. A lot of people go, oh, meditation, woo-woo, because they think you have to sit in a quiet place and stop your mind from doing crazy things.
Yeah, you go do your ohms and your shanties and whatnot,
No, you don't. Meditation really is just being mindful. And if you can be present where you are in a certain period of time, then you're meditating. So for me, running, you kind of got to be conscious about what you're doing when you're running. You're in the zone. You can think about it, and it processes. If you're riding a bike, if you're walking your dog, you can be in the zone there, and you can meditate, you can be mindful. You have to think about what your dog's doing. Be in that moment, and don't let anything else go on around you. Don't worry about the other stuff, and your processes. So the endurance running itself was just a way to process things without knowing that that's what I was doing, and that ended up being the fact that, wow, that works really well. And so then I guess that's kind of really the gist of what it is and why.
Yeah.
And it's just grown from there. Great.
No, I actually fully understand what you're saying there. I'm a weightlifter, and I used weightlifting to get through my PTSD when I was first diagnosed. And you get into this zone, I think most weightlifters call it the pump. And you get into that spot, and that's all you're thinking about. Your mind's quite clear. You feel really just energized and really good about yourself. Yeah, you start thinking about things you didn't realise you were thinking about. And I'm a writer, so I learnt to take a notepad with me, just jot things down, and you come back to a lady, you're like, it's genius.
If you know how many times that I solved the world hunger and conflict in the human species on the run, it would be crazy.
You need a little recorder in your pocket.
I know, and I have one on my phone, but I never think to pull it out. And then I'm like, oh, I'll remember that later. And you're like, oh, crap.
Yeah, you never remember it. No. Do you use anything when you're running to keep you going, so you don't listen to music or podcasts or anything?
Generally not, no. Sometimes during training I will, but for the most part I generally just run and listen. Most of my running is done in the bush.
Yep.
And if you're allowing yourself to be in the moment and be present, you need to kind of listen to what's going on around you and the birds and just the sound of your footfall. And it really is, it opens you up to so much more around you. Yeah.
Great. Awesome. So you've become an ambassador for PTSD Resurrected?
Yeah. A funny story, that Andy and Zoe, the founders of PTSD Resurrected, I worked with Andy years ago in the army and never realised when I first met him that was the case. And then a friend of mine who also worked with Andy, he's like, oh, remember Andy? He was blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh. And it's like, he was the dude that charged you, wasn't he? And he's like, yeah. I was like, okay. So, and then it turns out that these two guys were living next suburb over from each other on the Gold Coast, and they didn't even realise that they were so close.
Yep.
So it was kind of a crazy reconnection. I met Andy through another friend. I did a 84-kilometre run in Bali last year, the Bali Hope Ultra, and I met a lady who worked with Andy. She did their books, or does their books. And after the Bali Hope, she's like, oh, you should meet Andy because he's really cool and he does the same sort of stuff you're into. So I'm like, oh yeah, no worries. So we caught up and had a chat, and like it was straight away we disconnected. And so he said, look, we want to support you on this run. So this was for last year's Run for Resilience. And he said, look, what can we do? And I said, well, I need a charity, because if I'm just doing it for a run, then I'll look stupid. So if I do it for something, then it looks cool. So I thought I'll just do it for something. So we connected there. Okay, it was a bit deeper than that, but we just had an amazing connection, and it was really good. So we did the run, we worked together, we raised quite a bit of money for them, which was a whole lot of fun. And then afterwards, Andy and Zoe said, look, we'd love you to actually come on board and be an ambassador for us. So I was, very stoked to have that. It's exciting.
So
looking forward to it.
What does your role include, being an ambassador?
Basically, it's just being someone that's in the public eye, or in the forefront, sort of going out and spreading the message for PTSD Resurrected and what it is that they do. And then it's being also that person who, I guess, can be an inspiration, or an example of what is possible. I'm not saying that I do everything right, but as long as you recognise when you're going off track, and then when you realise that, you get yourself back on track. It's all good. It's life. Everyone does that. You'd know that yourself.
I'd know that. Yeah.
It's just saying, look, if you're going through hard stuff, there's ways to deal with it. My way is completely different to someone else's, because I know a lot of people who would not want to run.
Oh, I'm not a runner. Yeah. No, I'm a weightlifter. Screw running.
I don't like lifting heavy things, so it works. But yeah, so it's just being an example. This is one way to deal with it. You just figure out your own tribe, and then you'll find your own ways to deal with it. But if you don't show people that there are ways, then they may not know to look, because I guess you don't know what you don't know, do you?
No, you're exactly right. And I guess it's not easy putting yourself out there as that person either.
No, God, no.
I mean, then you've got to talk about things, and you've got to express, and you've got to admit to people that you had PTSD, or you have PTSD, because you never really lose it, and that you're forever dealing with it, and that's not always easy to stand up in front of someone and say. It
gets easier, but you do have to be careful that you don't just get into too much of a habit of just saying what people kind of want to hear.
Yeah.
You do have to make sure that you stay genuine and authentic with it, and it changes every time. You've got to make sure that you do stay legit.
Well, I mean, this is the kind of community you'll get called on it pretty quickly if you're not legit.
Sure.
So what's next then? What are you training for? Where are you going from here?
Well, what's next is in 2 days. So on Wednesday, I'm running 200 miles, actually 218 miles. So it's about 350 kilometres from Northcliffe down to Albany. That's predominantly on the Bibbulmun track. And basically that run, it's an actual race. So it's a 200-mile race called the Delirious West.
Yeah, that sounds like a good name for it.
I expect to be extremely delirious after a couple hundred Ks, don't worry. And that's just the race. It's organised by a good friend of mine, Sean Casler. He's got a series of races around Western Australia, and one of them that is the next one that I'll be coming over for is actually Light Horse Ultra, which
Sean's opened up for free entry to anyone who's been serving or ex-serving, so it's really cool. The fun thing about that one is that you don't have to run a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 3, 6 or 12 hour race. The Shen's a 9 hour, I think. So you can walk for 3 hours, you don't have to run. Or you can decide to be crazy and run for 12 hours. So that'll be the next one. But that's going to be really cool, and I'm the ambassador for that run as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we're using that to raise money for PTSD Resurrected.
Great. Yeah, we've been in contact with those guys, and we're setting up a podcast interview with them soon, hopefully, so they can tell us all about the race as well. I know they do it every year for Anzac Day. And as he said, guys, it's free for anyone who has served, so make sure you get involved if you can. Now, so you're doing the track down at Albany, so that's actually, I'm not sure if you're aware, that's the track that our troops went down.
Yes.
Before they went off to war, so you're on both sides of the country.
The plan for Run for Resilience is this year I'll be doing a run called The Men from Snowy River,
Mm-hmm.
and that's actually going to follow the recruitment march that was done through the Blue Mountains
Right.
for World War One. That'll be a fun little adventure. But then in the next year or two, we'll actually be coming over to WA and doing a specific. So we'll have to sit down and do some discussions about that.
All right.
It's
Happy
going
to.
to be good to have a couple of years of planning for that one. Yeah, the intention behind, I guess, Run for Resilience really is that I want to recreate or retrace as many of the recruitment marches that I can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's essentially, well, why not do one in every state to start with? And so that could literally, state and territory is going to take 7 years, so let's just get rolling and we'll do that. It'll be fun.
Great. Awesome. Well, I love the message. I love what you're doing. I think you're a little bit nuts for running that far, but...
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Look, I'm being polite here. I want you to come back, so I've got to be nice. So when you hit down to Albany, you have to stop off at the light display they've got down there for the Anzacs, because it's stunning and that'll knock your socks off. So is there any other quick little stories that you want to share? Or
Not really. I'm really looking forward to this ultra down in Northcliffe to Albany. It's going to be horrible. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's a really great analogy, I think, ultra running and the struggles that people go through after service, and I think that's the main thing I kind of want to put across to everyone is, if you think about it, the transition is just like an ultra. You may or may not feel good when you go into it,
mm-hmm.
and then there's a period where you've got people around you and everyone's excited, and then over time you start to thin out, you start to get worn down, you end up in a really dark and horrible place and everything hurts and you really just want it to end. But if, no matter how bad it gets, if you just push that little bit further, you get through the other side, and then when you do get to whatever the finish line is that you want to make it, but literally finishing an ultra, it just feels so amazing when you cross that line. And the people that are there with you, even if you don't see them, there's people in the background that are always doing something, that are always going to be helping. And so you can always just sort of reach out and connect with somebody who will understand where you're coming from. And yeah, just push through when it gets really, really hard and dark. And I'm saying this right now because I need to remind myself this in a few days' time when I'll be going second night with no sleep. But yeah, no matter how dark it gets, there is always something on the other side. And if I hadn't found ultra running, I don't know what might have happened.
Mm-hmm.
But going through something that's a physical and mental reminder every time I run is a really good thing to just make me realise how lucky I am to still be here.
mm-hmm.
And I want to help show everyone else that that's something to look forward to, although you don't have to run a ridiculous long distance.
No, like I said, I think your analogy of it's spot on. It's a really, really profound way of looking at it. Where can people find you online?
Facebook's always really good. If you just look for Run for Resilience, you can use the 4 number or the 4 the words, and you'll find it. On the interweb, Run for with the number 4 Resilience, and you can always look at PTSD Resurrected. They've got some great info there, and that's probably about it. Just Google my name or Google Run for Resilience and you'll find us.
Great. If you want to know more about PTSD Resurrected, we did interview them a couple of weeks ago, so jump back in the podcast and have a look at them too. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Good luck on the next run.
Thanks.